Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year, Roth.
Happy New Year to you, Dan Murrell.
We're back from the break.
We are. We're going to
and
review movies.
In addition to holidays and fun and family and presents and everything else that comes with the end of the year. But we both watched a little bit of Netflix over the holidays.
I watched quite a bit of Netflix over the holidays, and a couple of those things were relevant to what we do here.
That's right. So there were two big Netflix releases that came out over the holidays. Both of them I was really kind of surprised were as big on social media as they were. We're going to talk about both of them right here. The first one is Bird Box, the meme of the late December.
Yeah, it's funny because I think Bird Box, of course, a lot of chatter happened around it because Netflix revealed that 45 million downloads over the 2 days, the first 2 days of release, or something to this effect over the first weekend of release. So that started it. And then, of course, as we discussed earlier today on SJU, then there were the memes and the Bird Box Challenge that kept it in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Good news for Netflix, I guess. All publicity is potentially good publicity
Sure.
unless people are really hurting themselves, which apparently they are.
There you go.
So the film itself, Dan.
Yes.
What did you think? My initial thought going into it, even just looking at the marketing, was that it was too bad that it came out the same year as A Quiet Place.
Very unfortunate. Yes.
Very unfortunate because it has a very similar premise. One has to do with being quiet.
Yeah.
One has to do with not being able to see. But they felt similar enough that I thought, oh man, now you're going to have to live up to The Quiet Place, which was excellent.
It was like if A Quiet Place and The Happening had a baby.
Yes.
Because when it first started, I was like, oh wow, I'm getting I had to literally shake them off. I was like, I'm getting such strong vibes of The Happening right now that everybody's killing themselves and they're running in. They have a group, and I'm just like, I was expecting it to take a weird turn towards just bizarre, because that's what I'm trained with for The Happening. It didn't do that necessarily for me, but I think that was something that did have to overcome for me, was that it is similar to at least a couple of other movies that are out there. But as it went, I think the similarities got less and less, and I was able to take it on its own terms a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that it certainly, there's the post-apocalyptic premise is not unfamiliar currently, and in the last number of years been very popular, so that's not new. I think what's interesting to me about this movie is that what Sandra Bullock has done with a couple of the genre movies that she's been a part of, I would include Gravity, is that it takes kind of this big premise, right? But it really localizes it in one very, very key, small emotional arc. So, and I don't mean small in the sense that insignificant, because it's very significant to the individual, but I just mean specific.
Right.
So in Gravity, that was somebody choosing to live despite their grief, right? And it was like this entire ordeal, but that's really what the movie was about.
Right.
I choose to live. And this is, of course, I choose to allow myself to connect with other people, even in the face of the certainty of pain and loss. Which is very human and very relatable in very heightened circumstances in this particular case.
Very heightened. I felt like, thematically it paid her character off very well, I think, from beginning to end. Where I struggled with it a little bit was that I felt like the movie itself was struggling to figure out what it was going to be. Was it this very big picture end of the world? Because that's the first 30, 45 minutes, you're following Sandra Bullock's character, but as you bring in John Malkovich, Toronto Rose, you're bringing in this big cast of people, and it's a great cast of people.
Unbelievable.
And it seems like you're building towards this sort of tale of the end of the world, and, maybe not the whys of it, but certainly a little bit deeper into what is actually going on here.
Right.
And then the third act, which you're seeing parts of as the movie goes on, is very closed structured. Just Sandra Bullock and these two kids, boy and girl, and their journey. And I felt by the end of it, it had a lot of great set pieces and a lot of great atmosphere, and there were certainly a lot of moments. But when we got to the end of it, I still felt like it didn't really quite succeed at being either. It didn't really quite succeed at being the big scope end of the world Armageddon type movie, or the intensely personal. I think if it was going to go that way, then if you spend the whole movie in the woods with Sandra Bullock and the kids, and you're tracking that journey, and what's past has passed, or you see less of it. But by including so much of both, I don't really know if it paid off either for me.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a there's a change in the ending from the source material. The price of entry to the sanctuary that they go to is a little steeper in the source material, and I can see why they backed away from it for the book, especially with those two adorable kids casting.
Yes.
But I won't say what it is, but like you can probably guess. It's a logical thing that would be asked of people in those circumstances. So that said, that aside, and I only point to that to say that's the level of commitment they were not willing to make to the created world, right? Because in this world, what would you do, Dan, to avoid this fate? What would you have to do?
You have to sequester yourself. You have to close yourself off, which is what she's struggling with.
Or you have to blind yourself.
Yeah.
Permanently. So those are sort of like I think it didn't commit to the world that it was creating, in which I think what it did well was not show us exactly what these beings were and not feel obliged to tell us why some people were affected this way and others weren't, because we knew as much as the characters did, which is that these crazy people are dangerous to me, so let's stay away from them.
Sure.
I don't care really why they're affected this way, and I'm not. I just don't want to be them, and I don't want to be dead.
Right.
We don't really know what people are seeing, what they're faced with. They're all faced with different things. We don't know why these entities are there. This might bother some people who kind of crave answers. I was fine with that. I was fine having it left to my own imagination, or to know just as much as she did. I think it did succeed in the sense that each character that was introduced was frankly either to illustrate how she was avoiding connection or fell into it and then had to deal with the loss. Her sister, Trevante Rhodes, I think are in that category, or a plot device, frankly. They were introduced to show you an aspect of these creatures, right? Like, oh, look, some people perceive them in a different way. I think it generally works. It doesn't have the elegance in the storytelling that I think A Quiet Place did. I don't think it's as tight in terms of the storytelling and the clarity of the vision as A Quiet Place, but I think she's really great. I think the rest of the cast is great. And I think the specificity of that emotional arc is there enough for me to have enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Plus it's creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy. It had great atmosphere. It had some good not jump moments, but gore moments and just very creepy moments. Sandra Bullock was great. She's always great. She's not just a great actor, but a great movie star. Yeah. And both of those she was delivered in this film. And yeah, I think that I didn't not enjoy it. I felt like it was held back by maybe either taking the source material and not figuring out which direction, do we go this way, do we go that way, where we really want to bore down on. It'd be like if A Quiet Place opened by seeing the entire world in chaos and ended on the farm. You sort of have both of these things competing, which is how I felt. But not a movie that I didn't enjoy. So, falls right on there in the spectrum. Some great stuff, some stuff that I wasn't quite on board with. But overall, I'd say it's worth your time, especially if you enjoy the horror genre or just the creepy, like it's kind of a Walking Dead vibe to it. Post-apocalypse. If you like any of that stuff, I think you'll really dig this one.
I think so too. I think it's perfect for what it is. I don't think it's a movie that needed to be released in theaters the way some of the Netflix movies should have been, or could be served that way.
Although I think the sound design maybe could have been particularly more effective in theaters than maybe it might have been at home. But maybe if you got a nice sound system, kick it up for Bird Box.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's Bird Box. Bandersnatch.
Black Mirror.
Yeah, Black Mirror's movie, which I had pretty high expectations because I'm a big fan of that series. Yeah. This is obviously their choose your own adventure experiment. Pretty fascinating to see that we have reached that point that you can do that. Sometimes I had to go through 3 devices before I could do it. It's not, you can't do it on every device, which I think sucks for a lot of people that only are able to have, if you only have an Apple TV connected to your television, then you're not going to be able to do this. Choose your own adventure. So the functionality, I think, for a lot of people wasn't there, which I'm sure was disappointing. I was able to cycle through and get it so that I could do it. And yeah, I love Black Mirror. I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a little more hit or miss
recently than it was when it first started, but I think that's what comes with success and expectation, and all of a sudden you're on a clock, you're on a schedule, you're on a timetable that maybe you weren't before. But I wanted to see what Charlie Brooker would do with this concept, and I thought it was an interesting experiment in storytelling more than I thought it was actually good storytelling.
So I feel like this is more of a gimmick. It is an incredibly well shot gimmick, and which isn't to say that I didn't enjoy the experience, because I actually really did. I thought the performances were strong. I thought that the base premise was interesting enough. The problem for me came in because there are a number of different endings. It's about 5.5 hours of content. And my first round through, I landed relatively quickly within about an hour and a half. Some people were in that story for 3 hours before they got to an ending.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A friend of ours was, but I got to the first ending pretty quickly, and it was very disappointing. It was maybe the worst version of an ending to a story like this that you could possibly have. Like, edging on it was all a dream, kind of like disappointing. After that, I came to more satisfactory endings, but the fact that that was the first one that I came to, and that it was unabashedly self-promoting on Netflix's part, and meta in a way that I think does not work, meta in a way that a marketing exec would think about meta and not a creator. No offense to marketing executives, good for you. You make a lot of money.
There's a lot of Netflix self-promotion in this,
really
which
is.
took me out of it, if I'm being honest.
It took me entirely out of it. And I think the problem is that Black Mirror, the episodes are these very well contained, extremely clear stories and parables about one thing.
Right.
And this was an idea about the idea. In other words, they didn't just create a story and then create 5 different potential endings. They created a story about the idea being that things have multiple versions, that you can make different choices, and who is really in control of those choices, right?
Right.
Parallel universes, so forth like that. It didn't ultimately work as a story. I think if you were to take the story and divorce it from the gimmick, it wouldn't be a very good episode of Black Mirror.
No, and that's sort of how I tried to process it beyond just the experience of doing it, was how does this work as a story? And I hit an ending the first time. I hit a dead end pretty early. There's a decision, not the serial one, but a decision pretty early on. If you go one way, it just ends. And I hit that pretty early on.
Interesting. I'll have to ask you about that.
I didn't mind that, because it sort of introduced me as a viewer to the concept that, like, this could end at any time and you're going to go back. And so that kind of got woven into me pretty, like, 15 minutes in. And then after that, I hit a couple dead ends, but I went pretty much straight through. And I hit the ending, I think that's the most common ending, which is also self-referential, but not quite as self-referential as some of the other ones, and is probably the most Black Mirror-ish of all the endings, in that it acknowledges what's happened. It brings it into the current day. It takes it out of the 80s and sets kind of an epilogue in the current day. And I think was the best of them. So I think I got a little bit lucky in that it resolved itself the first time for me in the most satisfactory way. I spent another couple hours just sort of going back and redoing decisions and finding all the different endings, and I never really found one that was as good as the one that I hit. And I think I read an article that said that's the one that most people hit first, was the one that I hit, and that's probably for the best.
Yeah, I think I hit the worst one.
You did.
I did.
You hit the worst one, I think.
Yeah.
So
bad decisions.
Bad decisions lead to bad endings. But even the ending that I hit, it still felt like I didn't get to the end of it and go like, oh, wow, this is a really revolutionary way to tell a story. And I feel very satisfied as a viewer that I've gone all the way through this and I have a very satisfying narrative arc. Instead, it was very much like, okay, that was interesting.
I think the experiment is what's interesting about it.
Yeah,
I think
it's
the
the
experiment in your own nature, and I think the experiment in that technology being available. I think this is the first, and we'll get better versions of this, and I look forward to that. As storytellers really figure out how to use this medium, that might be it. They just maybe don't fully get how to use it properly yet. to its fullest extent, because I loved choose your own adventure books when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
I loved this concept. I think it's really cool. But I also think there's something to be said for a story just taking you. But I will say there were a couple of choice points that I don't know if you've ever played any of the Telltale, like the Walking Dead.
Walking Dead.
Yeah. So like, like that they confront your sense of self. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
They want to cater to your darkest instincts.
Yeah. And so there were a couple of choice points. There's like a violent choice point that I kept rejecting, which is maybe why it led me to the unsatisfying
Oh, that's totally why, because I
end.
was just like, kill him.
Yeah, I every time it came up, I just kept rejecting that, and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then it forced me into this really upset, like really unsatisfactory, dumb ending.
Yeah, that's really not. That's yeah.
But it confronts your sense of self. I think that's
True.
that if you play with that aspect of the ability in this storytelling to challenge your sense of self and moral right and wrong, that's when I think they're going to be at their height of how to use this medium.
Well, see, I think this is now illuminated. I think the difference between the two of us, because looking back on it, for me to get to where I got, you had to take the darkest option every single time, which is what I did.
Okay.
And so I went straight through because I figured in my head, I'm like, this is Black Mirror.
Yeah.
So if they want me to get to a place, I'm gonna have to choose the most effed up option you could possibly take, because that's where the juicy stuff is gonna be. And I think I might have been right.
Huh. Well, clearly you were, because
Yeah.
I very quickly got to a very boring place. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. The other thing, and I think I mentioned this on our morning show, if you watch that, is that as I was watching it, I was thinking of all of the nefarious ways that this data could be used.
It's already,
Tracking how people make choices and the decisions that they make and what that says about them as a person. The trick would be we're logged in under my boyfriend's name, but I was actually making the decisions. So you don't have my data.
Well, they do now.
Well, now they do.
Because now they can go back and see.
And
Yeah, exactly.
It. Well,
there's already stories being written about how Netflix is potentially going to use this to guide their analytics, to guide
storytelling.
Ironically, that's the most Black Mirror thing of this entire Black Mirror episode.
Is how meta, and that's the real meta place. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking of it the whole time. Like this is both fascinating and terrible.
Yeah. Because Netflix in 3 weeks, Netflix will release this thing that was like 67% of viewers chose
this violent act.
And after that, 54% chose to do this with the body, and 17% chose to, and it's like, they know all that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you think they're not keeping track of that,
they're
you're
keeping
crazy.
track
They
of
are
that.
keeping so much track of that. It was an entertaining way to spend a few hours.
Yeah.
So I will say, as a fan of interesting experiences,
Cool.
It was cool. I don't necessarily need this to take the place of a regular show for me. I'm not a choose your own. I don't want to see a whole choose your own adventure season. It was kind of a gimmick. It was a side. It was a novelty. As a fan of Black Mirror, I would say not their best episode.
No.
Good. Not anything to do with the acting.
No.
The cast was great. It was shot obviously always still well. Looked fantastic.
Yeah.
Just I feel like the focus was more on the experiment and less on.
Agreed.
Is each one of these paths going to take you to a satisfying story?
Because the thesis was unclear.
Yeah.
Right? It was really about the gimmick.
It was a riff on the gimmick.
It was just a riff on that. But that said, like I said, those two choice points were the places where I was most engaged. One was, are you going to do this violent act, like almost unmotivated?
Right.
Or it's kind of a situation where somebody else created a scenario and it's you or them.
Right. You have to decide.
And you have to decide. And I very quickly was like, they came up with a terrible idea. Why am I going to,
But then it puts you into a
turnaround. Into a turnaround. Yeah. So I will say that choice point was where I was like, is that a terrible thing to choose? you
Right.
know? But that's where I think the juice is in the gimmick. So if you created a season of The Walking Dead with this ability, that would probably be the best season of The Walking Dead, which would then be the Telltale game. So
that
in any
was true.
event,
Which was
the
like one of the best seasons of The Walking Dead. So there you go.
We solved it, Netflix.
We solved it.
You're welcome.
Bird boxes and Bandersnatch. Snatches? I don't know.
Snatches. Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch.
Catch the golden.
Yes, catch the golden Bandersnatch.
Egg.
Ross, we got so many more reviews
many more
coming.
things.
It's a new year, but the movie train doesn't stop. I think we've got there's one major release in theaters this weekend, which I think we're going to talk about.
Oh, we're going to talk about it.
And as always, I think we're going to just try to do some fun, different things with reviews this year. Mix it up, do different kinds, all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, you never know what you might get right here on Screen Junkies Universe. It's news.
Yeah, it's news, it's reviews, and it's us. Thanks for watching.